The morning I found out, I was standing in the bathroom of a hotel room in Edmonton, still in my work clothes from the night before, scrolling through my banking app because I couldn't sleep and I needed something mindless to do. I don't know why I opened my TFSA first. I usually checked my checking account, then closed the app and pretended I wasn't anxious. But something made me tap the wrong account. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was just bad luck. Either way, I looked at the balance. And then I looked again. And then I sat down on the cold tile floor because my legs stopped working. $61,412? Gone. I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. That number didn't appear overnight. I built it over 6 years of double shifts at the hospital, of skipping vacations, of eating lunch at my desk and telling myself the discipline was temporary. It was my down payment on a condo in Calgary. It was the first thing I had ever built entirely on my own. And on a Tuesday night in a Hampton Inn off White Avenue, it was just a screen telling me the available balance was 0. I called the bank at 4 inches the morning. The woman on the phone was kind in that careful, measured way people are kind when they already know the answer is going to hurt you. She read me the transaction history, 3 withdrawals over 4 days. The largest was $38,000. The last one, processed the previous afternoon, cleared out what was left. All of them had been authorized by the secondary account holder, my brother. I want to tell you exactly why I added him to that account, because I know what you're thinking. I've thought it too, in the months since. I've turned it over at 3 a.m. more times than I can count. The thing is, when you grow up watching someone, when you share a childhood and a back seat and a set of parents and 20 years of ordinary life with a person, your brain doesn't file them under risk. It files them under home. And home, you stop checking. My brother is 3 years older than me. Growing up in Mississauga, he was the one who walked me to school when my parents worked early shifts. He was the one who taught me to ride a bike in the parking lot of the No Frills on Lakeshore. When I got into the nursing program at McMaster, he drove 4 hours to take me out for dinner and told our parents at the table like it was his announcement too. And I remember thinking there was nobody in the world more proud of me than him. He had always been a little loose with money. That was just his way. He worked in sales, did well some quarters, and badly in others, always seemed to land on his feet. He had a habit of lending money to friends who didn't pay him back, of buying rounds when he couldn't really afford it, of talking about investments that never materialized into anything. But he was generous with me too, and generous people don't always keep their books clean, and I told myself the messiness was just part of who he was. I moved to Calgary 4 years ago for a position at Foothills Medical Center. I liked the mountains. I liked that nobody knew me. I liked the feeling of building something from a blank page. I found a 1-bedroom in Beltline, opened my TFSA the same week I started my first shift, and set up an automatic transfer every payday without touching the principal once. I had a goal. I wanted to own something. I wanted 4 walls that were mine. My brother called me last October. He said he was in a rough patch. He said a business deal had gone sideways. He used the word investment, but his voice had the particular flatness it gets when he's not telling me the full version of something. He said he needed time to sort it out, and in the meantime, could I possibly let him be on my account, just so he could transfer money to cover a few things while he waited for a payment to come through? I said no. He called again 3 days later. He said it was just temporary. He said he would never touch my savings, that he only needed access in case of an emergency, that he just wanted the option to move money around without having to ask me every single time because I was busy and he didn't want to bother me. He said he had done the same thing with a friend's account once, just as a stopgap, and it had worked out fine. He said, and I remember this exactly, "You know I would never do anything to hurt you." I said yes. I know. I've heard every version of you, should have known better from the inside of my own head, and trust me, I have been harder on myself about it than any comment section ever could. But I want to tell you the thing nobody talks about when these stories get shared around. It is not stupidity that makes you say yes. It's love. It is 20 years of evidence that this person is safe. It is the specific cruelty of a betrayal that works precisely because it comes from somewhere you never thought to defend. I added him to the account. I went on a 2-week work placement in Edmonton. And somewhere in the middle of those 2 weeks, while I was doing 12-hour shifts and eating bad Thai food from a place near the hospital, my brother transferred $61,000 into an account I had no visibility into. The bank was helpful and also completely useless. They told me what had happened. They could not undo it. The transactions were authorized. The secondary account holder had legal access. A fraud claim requires proof of fraud, and proof of fraud requires a paper trail. And the paper trail showed nothing except my brother making withdrawals from an account I had added him to of my own free will. The woman on the phone told me I could contact the police. She said it in the tone of someone who had said that sentence 100 times and knew exactly how it ended. I booked the earliest flight back to Calgary that I could find. I did not call my brother. I did not call my parents. I stared out the window at the flat expanse of central Alberta, and I thought about 6 years of lunch breaks and double shifts and automatic transfers, and I did not cry, which surprised me, because I am not someone who is usually good at not crying. I think I was too tired. Or maybe some part of me understood that crying was going to have to wait, because there were things that needed to happen first. I drove from the airport straight to my parents' house in Mississauga. My brother was there. This was the thing that struck me before I even got through the door. He was there, in the living room, watching television with a bowl of chips, completely at ease, as though the last 2 weeks had been ordinary. He looked up when I walked in, and his face did something complicated that I think was supposed to look like surprise, but arrived about 2 seconds too late. My mother came out of the kitchen. She hugged me and said I looked tired and asked if I wanted pasta. I said, "He emptied my TFSA." The room went quiet. My brother set down the bowl of chips. He looked at the television first, then at me, and then he said, "I was going to pay it back." I asked him how. I asked him specifically, with a number and a date, how he was going to pay back $61,000 when he had needed to drain my savings account because he didn't have any money of his own. He said the payment he was waiting for was coming through by end of month. He said it was a sure thing. He said he had borrowed it. He used the word borrowed because he was desperate and he knew I had it, and he knew I wasn't using it right now, and he told himself it was okay because he was going to put it all back before I even noticed. My mother sat down on the arm of the sofa. She looked at my brother and then at me and then at her hands, and then she said, "You're 29. You have a good job. You can save it again." I want to pause here because I need you to feel what that sentence does to a person. Not the anger. The anger came later, and it was clean and useful. What it did first was something quieter. It reached back 6 years and told me that every early morning and every skipped trip and every small decision to choose the future over the present had been, in my mother's accounting, essentially replaceable, interchangeable, that the time didn't count, that the work didn't count. Only the number counted, and the number could be rebuilt. So, what was the problem, really? I looked at her for a long moment. I said, "You're right, I can." I said, "And I want you both to understand that this is the last conversation about this I am going to have that doesn't involve a lawyer." My brother's expression shifted. He said I was being dramatic. He said it was a family matter. He said going to a lawyer was something you did to strangers, not your brother. He said it in the voice people use when they have done something indefensible and want to reframe your reaction as the actual problem. I drove back to Calgary that night. I know that sounds like a lot of driving. It was. I put on a podcast I didn't listen to and watched the dark highway unreal in front of me, and somewhere around Red Deer I pulled over and finally cried, not for very long, and then I kept going. The next morning I called a lawyer. She was a woman in her late 50s who specialized in civil disputes and had the particular energy of someone who had heard everything and remained unimpressed by all of it. I explained the situation. She explained my options. Because I had voluntarily added my brother to the account, the criminal threshold for theft was harder to meet. The access was authorized, even if the use of it wasn't what I'd intended. But I had a strong civil case. A signed agreement, or even documented communications, establishing the conditions of the access, any texts, any emails where he had said he would not touch the savings would help significantly. I went back through my phone. I found 7 text messages in which my brother explicitly told me he would not touch the TFSA. 2 of them used the word promise. One of them said, "And I am not making this up. I swear on everything I will not touch your down payment savings. I just need the access for the checking transfers." I forwarded them to my lawyer. I want to tell you about the 3 months that followed, but I also don't want to make this the part of the story you spend the most time in, because it was mostly waiting and paperwork, and the particular low-grade exhaustion of dealing with a thing you never should have had to deal with. My brother hired his own lawyer. My parents called several times, and several of those calls involved my mother crying and asking why I was doing this to the family, and I had to learn slowly, imperfectly, how to hang up the phone without explaining myself. My lawyer filed a civil claim. My brother's lawyer responded. There were back and forths I won't bore you with. Eventually, 4 months after I sat on the floor of that hotel bathroom, my brother signed a repayment agreement. He had used the money to cover gambling debts, not a business deal, not an investment, gambling debts, which his lawyer disclosed in a way that was clearly meant to generate sympathy, and instead only made me feel a specific kind of tired. The agreement set out a repayment schedule. I knew, and my lawyer knew, and probably even my brother knew, that he was not going to hit every payment, but it was something. It was documentation. It was the beginning of accountability, even if it wasn't the satisfying, complete version of it. He has missed 2 of the payments so far. I go back to my lawyer each time. It is not a fast process. It is not the clean resolution that makes for a satisfying ending. But I stopped needing a satisfying ending somewhere around month 2. Here is what I did instead. I moved to a new bank. I know that sounds small, but it mattered to me. I opened accounts my brother had never heard of in a branch he had no reason to walk into, with an advisor who didn't know my family. I changed my direct deposit. I updated my beneficiary designations. I set my TFSA contributions back to automatic and watched the numbers start to climb again slowly, the way it had the first time. Except this time I felt differently about it. Not defeated, not bitter. Something more like deliberate. I had a conversation with a financial advisor at my new bank, something I should have done years earlier, about what it actually means to give someone access to your accounts and what the legal distinctions are between different types of account access. I learned things I hadn't known. I wish someone had taught me at 22. I think about that a lot now, actually. That financial literacy isn't just about budgeting and investment returns. It's about knowing where your boundaries are and what it means legally when you move them, even for someone you love. I blocked my brother on my phone. This is the part people sometimes push back on. He's your family, you'll regret it, keep the door open. I understand that impulse. I even feel it sometimes. But I have started to understand something about doors and who gets to walk through them. And the understanding is this: a door can be open without being unguarded. And some people have shown you, clearly and specifically, that they will walk through any door you leave open and take whatever they find on the other side. My mother and I are in a complicated place. We talk occasionally. She has not apologized. Not really. There have been sentences that resembled apologies and fell short of them. She still believes, I think, that I made the situation worse by involving a lawyer, that there was a version of this we could have solved around the kitchen table if I had just been more patient. I have thought about that version of events and I cannot find it. I cannot find the version where I sat in that living room and said, okay, fine, pay me back whenever you can, and came out of it with anything intact. What I have instead is a new bank and a repayment agreement and a TFSA that is sitting just above $9,000, which is a long way from 61, and sometimes I look at it and feel the distance. But here is the other thing I feel, and I want to be careful to tell you this clearly because it is the part I didn't expect. I feel lighter. I spent 6 years being the responsible one, the one who saved, the one who answered the phone, the one who came home for every birthday and helped my dad with his taxes and drove my mother to her appointments when she didn't want to take the bus. I did these things because I love my family and also because somewhere along the way, I had absorbed the belief that if I was useful enough and reliable enough and present enough, the family would hold together around me, that my contribution was structural, that if I kept being the one who showed up, nothing bad would happen. That is a heavy thing to carry, and it is wrong. And I only found out it was wrong when the structure failed anyway, not because I stopped carrying it, but because someone I trusted reached into the thing I was building for myself and took it. I am not saying the lesson was worth the cost. I want to be clear about that. $61,000 is $61,000, and the lost time is lost time, and I am still angry, sometimes in the specific way you are angry at something you cannot undo. I'm not one of those people who will tell you that the betrayal was secretly a gift. It wasn't. It was just a theft, and a slow and partial recovery, and a lesson I learned the hard way about where my own borders are. But here is what I know now that I didn't know before. I know that love and access are not the same thing. I know that trust has to be proportional to what's at stake. I know that when someone tells you they would never hurt you, that sentence is not a guarantee, it's a hope, and sometimes a manipulation, and you are allowed to ask for something more concrete than a promise from someone who needs something from you. I also know that I built $61,000 once from nothing. I know what it takes. I know I can do it again because I have already done it. And this time I know more than I did before. And this time the account has my name on it, and only my name. And there is a particular piece in that which I did not know to value until I understood what its absence felt like. I work the same shifts. I pack the same lunch. I set the same automatic transfer on the same payday. The mountains outside Calgary look the same as they did before all of this happened. The morning is still the best part of the day. I still walk to work sometimes when the weather holds. Through the river pathway, past the dog walkers and the cyclists and the particular low gold light that comes off the bow in October, I am still building something. It is slower this time, and I am more careful. And I do not talk about numbers with people who have ever shown me they were listening with the wrong intention. But I am still building. And the door to whatever I build next belongs entirely to me.